Hello and welcome once again to the Truist Leadership Series. We have a fantastic guest today and best-selling author Wes Moore. During the 4 years he served at the helm of Robinhood, Robinhood raised more than $650 million to combat poverty in the New York City area. Moore is also a best-selling author, a combat veteran, and a social entrepreneur. His first book, The Other Wes Moore, which we're going to talk about, is about the fine line between success and failure in our communities and in ourselves. He is also the author of the work, Discovering Wes Moore, This Way Home, and his most recent book is 5 Days. Wes grew up in Baltimore and in the Bronx, where he was raised by a single mom. Despite childhood challenges, he graduated Phi Theta Kappa from Valley Forge Military College in 1998 and Phi Beta Kappa from Johns Hopkins University in 2001. Wes then served as a captain and paratrooper with the United States Army's 82nd Airborne. He later served as a White House fellow to Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. Before becoming CEO at Robinhood, Wes was founder and CEO at Bridge Edu, an innovative tech platform addressing the college completion and job placement crisis. Although Wes has worked with Robinhood for the past 4 years, his family has maintained their residence in Baltimore. Wes, welcome to the Truist Leadership Series. We really appreciate it.
It is an absolute joy to be with you, and thank you for your leadership, and thank you for this invitation.
You're very welcome. I'm excited about the conversation. Let's start with today being your last day as CEO of Robinhood, an incredible organization that's achieved great things under your leadership. But some of our viewers may not be totally familiar with Robinhood. Can you tell us a little bit about what this great organization does?
Absolutely. And, it's interesting that, having this conversation on what is my last official day as the CEO of Robinhood, where, I remember the day when I first got a phone call asking me if I'd be interested in being the CEO of Robinhood. And what was really interesting to me is I knew the history of Robinhood. Now Robinhood is a 32-year-old organization that has an exclusive position and goal of ending poverty as we know it. And Robinhood started off with 5 founders and made about $40,000 worth of grants to use data and use metrics because all of these people were business people and finance people. And they said, we know data. And so how do you incorporate data into finding the best organizations that are able to combat the scourge of poverty? And now, 32 years later, Robinhood has given away close to $4 billion into the poverty fight, in everything from education to housing to transportation to criminal justice reform. Everywhere where poverty is either the cause or the consequence, we will find, we will fund, we will build if necessary. But I think about that in context of this being my final official day, where I remember when they first contacted me, and I told them, I said, I've been pretty critical of philanthropy before, and they said, no, we've seen it. It's all over the internet. And I said, then why are you contacting me about this role? And they said, well, because we actually think that this is a moment for philanthropy to push harder and to be bolder. And 4.5 years after taking on the role of CEO, I'm incredibly proud of the fact that as an organization and as a team that we've built, that I think we've been able to do that. We've been able to leverage policy. We've been able to go at the root causes of why poverty exists in the first place. We've been able to address issues like race in our work. We've been able to spread our wings past New York City and make investments in other places around the country, first of which is my hometown of Baltimore, Maryland. So, so it's a bittersweet moment to say goodbye to this role and my official role within the team. But we're just incredibly proud of, in a period where our society got hit so hard, we're thankful for the kind of response that the Robinhood Foundation took inside this moment.
Well, you should be really proud of that, Wes. I'll tell you personally, I grew up in a very impoverished situation on a tobacco and cotton farm. And when I see people like you out there doing this much good, raising billions of dollars, and what I like about what you're doing is adding innovation, current thinking in terms of how to solve these long-standing problems. It is exciting to me, and I can see why you would be very, very proud of it. But I know you got to have something in your heart, because I've been reading about you, and you're led from one service need to the next. So what's next in your heart?
Yeah, I think we're still making still thinking through. Going to take a little bit of time, but I also know that the thing that I'm leaning towards now is I want a big problem with a big budget. I say I don't want a small problem with a big budget. I want a big problem with a small budget. I want a big problem with a big budget, and I think there is no bigger problem that our society continues to wrestle with in this moment than the issue of just a stagnant economic growth. Whether you're talking about public policy and whether you're talking about public safety or whether you're talking about education, so many things at the root of all this is jobs, it's employment, it's good jobs. It's how exactly can we make addressing these disparities real? And I think in many ways, the disparities that we see that exist now, even what we had with COVID-19, it wasn't just that these disparities were exacerbated, but in many ways, they were exposed. We look at the fact that, even before COVID-19, 43% of people in this country could not afford a $400 shock with cash. We look at the reality that if you just take one geographic area, take New York City alone, where prior to COVID-19, half of the city lived in poverty for at least a year, right? Over the last 4 years. And that wasn't half of a borough, half of a demographic. Half of the entire city lived in poverty for at least a year over the past 4 years. And so when I think about the issues that I want to be able to attack now and how I want to spend my time, I want to be very deliberate and very, very intentional about the fact that ending these economic disparities that we continue to see, providing economic pathways and opportunity for people, ending child poverty as we know it. These are all things that have been fundamentally my life's work, and all things that I'm going to make sure that I continue doing into this next steps as well.
Well, I'll give you an idea. I've been thinking about this for a long while myself. I'm really worried about, where our country is in terms of, helping people find their way out of the environment we're in and basically finding a sense of happiness. I mean, I think this COVID experience has caused so many people to be just unhappy. And so I'll tell you this, maybe it'll prompt your next journey, but I've told people, I said, you know what? People lack purpose. When you don't have purpose in life, then you can't be focused on overcoming obstacles. But we have a great purpose in this country. We're just not doing real great at it. The purpose was declared in the Declaration of Independence that everybody deserves the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And when we look around today, I don't see that happening. And so maybe you can just shoot for a high office and take on that worthy goal. You could make the whole world better.
Well, and honestly, I think it's something that when we think about, a lot of these issues that we continue to see right now, these are things that I know that I think deeply about. I think about in my home state of Maryland, and it's something that I've been public about the fact that I'm actively considering and exploring looking at the governor's race in Maryland, because there is this belief that, to your point, that we can move faster. We can be bolder in this moment and live up to the ideals that were laid out in our originating documents, right? I mean, the thing about this country is a remarkable experiment. It's a country that was built on a framework and on a baseline and on a constitution that it's not just that this is something that has stood the test of time in our own country. There are other countries who have modeled our constitution, that have modeled our Declaration of Independence, that have modeled the prime documents that this country is built upon. Now, we know with the history of this country has been remarkably uneven. The history of this country has led us down places where, there has to be an honest reflection about the founding of the country and about the things that have compounded upon it. But the thing that continues to keep the country moving is there has to be and continues to be this continued push for progress. That is, as I said, the moral arc is long, but it bends towards justice. But it doesn't bend towards justice because of gravity, right? It bends towards justice because there are people on the other side who are pulling it that way. And so when I think about where we are as a collective society, the reality is that we do need to take a moment to appreciate just how much progress and just how much work had to happen in order for that progress to happen. Yet at the same time, we cannot stop pushing. And we cannot stop having a core and a clear focus that we can and we should do better than what we're doing right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm a big fan of John Kennedy, and I use all the time the moonshot concept. When he said, "Let's go to the moon," nobody thought we could do it. We didn't have the capacity to do it, but he had this vision, and that's the way I think about the Declaration of Independence. We have this vision, and we have done great things in this country. I mean, we know, and we know we can do it. We just have to get focused more on providing that real honest pursuit of happiness opportunity for everybody. One of your books is the work itself, and you go through the journeys of some of your work experiences, and I find that you seem to get a sense of joy out of work. We talk about it at Truist in terms of our purpose, in that our purpose drives us, gives us that sense of direction and energy. And in every chapter of your life, you seem to have found purpose and joy in terms of what you're doing. I love one of the quotes that you have in one of your books from Martin Luther King, where you say, "Everybody can be great because everybody can serve." Can you expand on that?
Absolutely. And it's something that I realize that we have this common understanding and this framework around what we mean by greatness. And sometimes greatness means that you are the best at this, or you've made the most money at that, or you have risen the fastest in this, or you were the first to accomplish this. But it's a very, in many ways, it's a myopic understanding of what being great actually means. That this idea and this definition of greatness is not simply about were you able to score the most points? Were you able to, survive the longest or whatever the case is? But the definition of greatness actually is what kind of lasting impact can you or will you make on the world long after you are gone? And when we think about it from that definition and we broaden out the definition of what greatness actually is, you realize that we all, as Dr. King says, we all can be great because we all can serve. We all can find that thing that makes our heart beat a little bit faster and attack it and go after it and know that that thing is your specific thing, but it's something that you have a unique opportunity to make an impact on. And I think about it where even what I want to describe within the work was my own journey and my own professional journey, where, I realized that, I was in places and spaces oftentimes that I was trying to keep up with people because this is what other people were telling me was the right thing for me to do, right? Oh, you should do this because this is a really good thing for you to do. You should do that because it's a really good thing for you to do. All those things, and people will always give you counsel and advice that's coming from a place of love, but it's coming from their perspective, right? I can give somebody advice till I'm blue in the face, but they have to understand that the advice that I'm giving is coming from my perspective. And they should take it and internalize it, but then still make a decision based on what's going to be best for them. And I started realizing that when people actually are considered great at what they do, there's actually only one thing that they all have oftentimes in common. It's not where they're from. It's not their background. It's not where they went to school. It's the fact that they are absolutely obsessive and passionate on what they do. I've never met anyone who's great, truly great at what they do. And I ask them, so do you love what you do? And they're like, it's okay. Right? I've never met that person. Everyone who I've ever met who's really great at what they do, and I ask them, do you enjoy what you do? It's like immediate. It's like, absolutely. I love what I do. I wake up in the morning thinking about it. I go to bed at night thinking about it. I spend my whole day processing it. I'm great because I love what I do. And so when we're talking about this idea of greatness and this idea of service, I think part of the thing that we all have to do collectively is to be able to go through your own internal intellectual audit and find that thing that makes your heart beat a little bit faster. Find that thing that you know that you would give everything to fix. Find that thing that you would give everything to achieve and go after it, because the path to greatness, it lies through that journey. There is no endpoint that ends up with you being great at something if that journey is not is not completely tethered to that whole thing.
That is so absolutely true from my perspective. So, Wes, one of my one of my 5 great books is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. As you know, he survived the Holocaust, spent 3 years in Auschwitz, and in that book he said, "If you know your why, you can endure any how." I paraphrase it to say, if you're clear about your purpose in life, you can figure out how to overcome the obstacles. That's what you just described. That why, that purpose, that what gets my heart beating. That's what so many people are missing in life, and so they kind of wander through life, and they never get that excitement, that joy of knowing that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. But my God-given purpose, I'm doing it to the best of my ability. I get excited about it, and because I know I'm making a difference. And you've certainly done that throughout your life. And so that purpose, that what makes your heart beat, as you described, and I like that description. It really is what matters. Gives meaning to life, and it really does help people. But I've had a challenge when I've talked to people about helping them figure out what is their why in life. Do you have any recommendations for how people can get in touch with that why?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple things that I think people can do to really help to achieve that. One is there is this importance of being still that can help you to accomplish what it is that why. Because oftentimes we are in such a fast-paced motion and this rush on life, and part of it, these are all real things. It's like we're trying to make sure that our kids get to school. We're trying to make sure that our parents are okay and taken care of. We're trying to make sure that I get to my job on time and I can do X, Y, and Z. But oftentimes it's like all of the answers that we're looking for are right there. We're just moving so fast that it feels like a blur. And so it is important that people do take some time to be able to just be still, just to be at peace with yourself, and then find out, when all of the noise dissipates, what is the thing that is still speaking to you? What's the thing that when you close your eyes you think about, and what is that utopia actually? Then what does that mean, and what is it framed out as? And that then helps you generally to get to that point. I say the second thing though is make sure you're surrounding yourself with people who you don't only admire, but people who support you in this journey of finding your why. One of my best and dearest friends in the world is actually is a teammate of yours, a gentleman named Thomas Ransom, one of the senior execs there. And he's a person who I consistently lean on, who I consistently throw thoughts, advice, counsel to, my frustrations, just to get his response. But he's someone who doesn't just help to center me. He's someone who helps me to remember and reflect upon my why consistently. And so the second piece that I would say to people is make sure that you're surrounding yourself with people who are pushing you to always remember your why, and make sure you're surrounding yourself with people the way I do with Thomas Ransom, but pushing yourself with people who are always pushing you to be better, and are pushing you to be able to live into and live up to that greatness. Because when you have that around you, you'll find that a lot of the jagged edges and a lot of the complicated roads, they feel a bit smoother, both in understanding what that why is, and then also helping you to understand how you need to actually get there.
Yeah, that's great. And one thing that I have found that helps people, it helped me, is to just kind of go back and reflect on your childhood, because oftentimes what happens in our childhood, some bad thing that happened or some great thing that happened, but something that made a real imprint in your life, sometimes that leads you to your why. I was talking to one of our teammates at Truist, and he talked about how when he was a small child, his house burned, and he and his single mom were homeless. And a lady came by and offered to let them stay in a house that she had that was available until they could get back on their feet. And so now, guess what? He's a mortgage lender for us. And he enjoys helping people get into their houses because it fulfills him. It's his why because of what he went through as a child. So I think in addition to what you said, it's also helpful to think back about, what happened when we were young.
When you think about what a home is, it's that place of safety, it's a place of security, it's where your children grow. It's where your relationships happen. It's where so much of your life centers and focuses.
I'm Brent Miller, and I'm a Truist teammate.
Out of all the things that I do, I never dreamed in my wildest dreams I would work for a bank. Back when I was 5, our home caught fire and burnt to the ground. At that point, we became homeless. It was pretty traumatic to see your home burn down, lose everything. We ended up just outside of Tulsa, and we were at a laundromat, and I get a little emotional, sorry. But we were at a laundromat, and the lady saw the plight that my family was in. And she approached my mother and said, I want to help. So she had taken us to her recently deceased mother's home and said, your family will live here until you get on your feet. And having lost a home and then being given that gracious gift of a home to stay in really impacted me as a young man. When you see people give so much of themselves freely, it really, like I said, set a really deep impact in my heart. And I've always felt that from that I needed to give back. When I graduated high school, I joined the United States Army. And I went and became a firefighter and an EMT. I'm an ordained minister.
Truist's purpose is to inspire and build better lives and community. Truist is just one more way that I get the privilege of helping people.
Working for a company that allows me to live out my desires to help people, how cool is that? So that people get that dream.
When I think about home ownership, I think about what that means to a family. And when I think about what I do at Truist, it's about helping preserve that gift of home ownership.
I wanted to ask you about one thing I was intrigued. You wrote in one of your books about a heartbreaking quote from David Graeber, an anthropologist and activist, and he said that huge numbers of people spend their working lives performing tasks that secretly they don't believe that they mean very much, that it doesn't make any difference, and that's kind of morally and spiritually damaging. And I've seen that in my life and in other people's life. So can you give people advice about how they can find purpose and value in their work? Because I know you have, and I have found that capitalism really works. You can work and you can, accumulate wealth, but you can do it in a way that makes the world better. But a lot of people don't have that, do they?
That's right. No, and it's a heartbreaking thought, right? The idea of every day existing within a space that you, in the back of your mind, or in some cases in the front of your mind, secretly believe should not even exist, right? I mean, that the weight of that is just crushing. And it's one of the reasons when I thought about it, where it was like, it's a difference between an occupation and your work. And those two things can be different things. Part of our job and part of our goal, and the thing that gives us, like you and I, the thing that, where we find a measure of peace in the fact that you can have a blending and a merging of your occupation and your work. Where occupation is, who's helping to pay your salary, who's helping to give you your job to do. But your work is something different. Your work is the thing that actually makes sure that you are fulfilling a fundamental need that the world has, and that you can uniquely fill it. And so making sure that you can find a way for your job and for your work, or your occupation and your work, to be able to merge and meld, is a really, really powerful and triumphant phenomenon that I think for a lot of people, for far too many people, they never actually are able to get there. And I think about it where, I was talking with a mentor of mine when I was actually getting ready to, when I was leaving the White House as a White House fellow, and I was getting ready to, go do another job. And he said to me, he's like, and I told him what I was going to do. He said, "Why are you doing that?" Because he knew where my heart was, and he knew this is very different than what I was going to do there. And I told him, I was like, well, I think it's important, and I'm helping to take care of my family, and I think smart people work there. And he said, listen, I will never criticize you for something that you do, particularly for something that you do that isn't with the needs to support your family. But he said, but the only thing I'm telling you is this: the day you feel like you can leave, leave. Because every day you spend doing something that you are not passionate about, you'll become extraordinarily ordinary. And that was indicting. This idea of becoming or being extraordinarily ordinary. The idea of not living up to a promise. The idea of taking all the investments that people made in you for all those years and not doing anything with it. That's an indicting feeling. And so I feel like part of this journey and part of this idea of coming up with that blend of your job and your work, it really means honoring that spirit that's giving you the counsel and the advice, but then sometimes we just don't pay attention to. That's the smartest and the best way that we can honor the way that people have poured into us all these years, is by being able to pay homage and be able to support the type of things that then your spirit turns around and tells you what's important.
Wow, that is really, really powerful. I think about that a lot, and I say oftentimes, Wes, to our teammates or potential teammates at Truist, that the magic in life happens when your personal why aligns, not totally, but substantially, with what you do for work. Because when that happens, you don't work anymore. You get to get up in the morning and get excited about going to join a group of people that you enjoy being around, doing something that you're personally really passionate and believe in, that's going to make the world better, or whatever purpose you have. When you can do that, you just transcended working. You just moved to a much higher level of life.
Yes, that's exactly right. And you've given yourself the space and the opportunity for that everything, in every way and space and place that you maneuver in, you know that you are on the path. That it doesn't feel like a deviation. It doesn't feel like a lie. It doesn't feel like I'm not where I'm supposed to be. You've now given yourself room to breathe. And there's just no greater feeling than that.